Hey guys, tonight we're plunging into something less glamorous than a Jane Austen ball and more tragic than your first attempt at cutting your own bangs, having a period in Victorian England. Tonight's episode is dedicated to the real, unfiltered horrors of monthly misery in the age of corsets, coal dust, and medical advice that boiled down to, try not being a woman. So before you get comfortable, do me a favor, like this video and subscribe. But only if you actually enjoy hanging out with me while we dive into the bizarre parts of history. Drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from and how many times you muttered, "Thank God for modern plumbing tonight." Now, dim those lights, switch on a fan for some soft white noise, and let your body relax into whatever position Victorian etiquette would have forbidden. Let's pause for a second. Have you ever wondered what women actually did before pads, tampons, or the soothing voice of a pharmacist who doesn't bat an eye at your super plus request? What did people use before midol, prayer, leeches, or just pure spite? Did Queen Victoria ever get period cramps, or did she just declare war on them? Were corsets really helpful, or just another layer of pain on top of pain? Did Victorian doctors have any clue, or did they prescribe a cup of arsenic and a brisk walk? How did people deal with leaks, stains, shame, and let's be honest, the Victorian equivalent of that one guy at work who thinks periods are contagious? Congratulations, you've just woken up in the year 1864. You're in a chilly, underheated house in London, and you've got a pain that nobody wants to talk about, and nobody wants to help you solve. Good luck. You blink awake to the sound of horse hooves on cobblestones, the unmistakable scent of coal smoke, and the damp chill of a house built before insulation was invented. Your back aches, your bed is a lumpy Victorian mattress, and, congratulations, it's day one, Victorian England, where the only thing more regular than your cycle is the parade of social embarrassment. Let's start with your room. Room is a generous term. You share this freezing, slightly mouldy chamber with at least 3 other family members, and possibly a mysterious cousin who's been visiting since last Christmas. The wallpaper peels at the corners, the windows sweat with condensation, and the only thing thicker than the London fog is the layer of dust on the furniture. Somewhere nearby, a mouse is staging its morning commute through your slippers. As you fumble for your bearings, the first task is to do a quick and very discreet damage assessment. You try to move as little as possible, hoping your carefully arranged protection hasn't shifted in the night. The Victorian sanitary rag, beloved by no one, trusted by even fewer. If you're lucky, you wake up dry-ish. If you're unlucky, you're about to become an expert in Victorian stain removal before you've even had your morning tea. Now, let's talk about that bed. Victorian mattresses were stuffed with whatever was at hand. Straw, horsehair, or if you're fancy, actual feathers. Over time, these materials compact into mysterious shapes, all of which seem engineered to poke you in the kidneys. You rise from your bed like a recently exhumed relic, stretching joints that sound suspiciously like castanets. The cold air bites immediately. There's no central heating, just the faint hope that your father remembered to bank the fire last night. If not, you get to watch your breath condense as you change into your one scratchy undergarment, trying to do so with some privacy. There is, of course, no privacy. Your entire family is engaged in the sacred morning ritual of pretending no one is looking at anyone else's embarrassing stains, rashes, or existential despair. Breakfast will have to wait. First, you need to check the sheets for casualties. Laundry day is an event, not a habit. Victorian washing methods involve boiling water, lye soap, and an arm workout that would make a modern fitness influencer cry. If your monthly visitor has left its calling card, you have 2 options. Start scrubbing, or get creative with how you fold the covers. Your mother has a 6th sense for these things, so good luck sneaking anything past her. Outside, the sounds of London life drift in. Newsboys hawking papers, milkmaids clattering by, the distant clang of a blacksmith at work. There's a coal fire smouldering somewhere, sending a ribbon of acrid smoke through the chill. The city smells like ambition, desperation, and wet wool. If you're wealthy, maybe you get your own room, but you still get the same London air, a unique blend of industrial progress and mystery meat. You shuffle to the wash basin, one chipped bowl of icy water, used by everyone. Personal hygiene is a game of chance and etiquette. If you're hoping for a hot bath, you'll be waiting until Christmas, and even then, you'll share the same water as everyone else. For now, you splash your face, grit your teeth, and start the day with what Victorians called character, and what you call survival mode. Somewhere outside, the city is waking up. You, meanwhile, are just hoping your corset laces up straight and no one notices you've repurposed half a kitchen towel as a sanitary pad. You'd complain, but in Victorian England, that's just called being dramatic. So you sigh, grab your skirts, and prepare to face a world where the only thing colder than the floorboards is the look you'll get if you bleed on them. And so begins day one, a day like every other, but also uniquely awful in its own charming Victorian way. Good luck. You'll need it. There's no discreet trip to the bathroom. Instead, you peek beneath scratchy wool blankets and hope the homemade rags haven't betrayed you. Spoiler, they probably have. Welcome to a world where every stain is a potential scandal and sheets are expensive. It's the Victorian version of a high-stakes lottery. Will your improvised pad, really just a strip of old flannel, last washed sometime between never and when the cat had kittens, keep everything contained? Or will today begin with the secret, shameful art of flipping your bedding before anyone else wakes up? The answer, as always, is disappointment. Modern life is full of humiliations, but none quite compare to the quiet terror of the Victorian leak check. This is not just about comfort. This is about reputation, dignity, and avoiding the kind of family drama that can be heard 3 houses down. Stain a set of sheets, and you're not just inviting extra laundry, you're inviting suspicion, lectures, and the kind of whispered family meeting where everyone suddenly becomes an expert in feminine hygiene despite not being able to spell it. Privacy? No such thing. You share your room, your bed, and probably half your secrets with at least 2 siblings and a cousin who snores like a haunted accordion. Any sudden movement risks waking the whole slumbering pile, so you learn to master the ancient art of silent wriggling. Picture an octopus trying to sneak out of a fish net, but with more self-loathing. And then there's the cold. Victorian bedrooms are about as warm as a church crypt in February. The only heating you'll find is whatever's left in the hearth ashes downstairs, so changing your protection in the morning is a speed challenge. Strip, swap, and reassemble your many layers, petticoat, shift, drawers, skirt, before hypothermia sets in, or, worse, your little brother opens his eyes and asks far too many questions. If you discover a disaster, you act fast. Stain sheets are expensive. And, let's be honest, your family probably only owns 2. You try to rub it out with cold water, never hot, or you'll set the stain forever. Maybe you sneak the sheet into the wash before your mother notices, risking the 3rd-degree cross-examination about what on earth you girls do at night. In desperate cases, you strategically refold the blanket so your accidental artwork is hidden, buying yourself a day or 2 to plot an escape. Victorian life. Come for the tea, stay for the passive-aggressive textile management, and forget about disposable anything. Rags are precious and get reused until they fall apart. Every month, you stand over a pot of boiling water, stirring your shame and praying your brother doesn't ask why dinner smells like the laundry. Once clean, you hang them out to dry, preferably in the back garden, preferably when no one can see. But this is England, so there's a 90% chance it rains. Damp rags, damp spirits, and the ever-present threat of mildew. But maybe you're lucky. Maybe you manage a morning with no leaks. You stand up, shivering and triumphant, and wonder if this is what Queen Victoria felt like after winning another war. Then you notice the damp chill at the back of your skirt and realize, no, you were just sitting in yesterday's disaster. History repeats itself. and so do period stains. Eventually, you emerge into the kitchen, trying to act normal while sitting suspiciously straight-backed at the table. Your mother glances at you, then at the clothesline outside, then back at you. She says nothing. You both know the truth. In the end, the morning leak check isn't just a battle against biology. It's a battle against shame, against poverty, and against sheets you can't afford to ruin. But somehow, you survive. You patch, you wash, you hide, and you face another day. Because in Victorian England, every stain tells a story, and every story is better left unsaid. Victorian science meets folk wisdom, and the results are about as effective as yelling at clouds. Maybe your mother hands you a heated brick for your cramps. Maybe she gives you a list of foods to avoid, starting with everything you actually like. If all else fails, there's always a fainting couch. Welcome to the baffling world of 19th century period care, a place where almost every solution sounds like it was invented by someone who had only ever read about women in a book. Feeling miserable? Here, have a hot onion poultice. Got cramps? Lie down and think virtuous thoughts. In Victorian England, the line between remedy and random act of domestic sabotage was paper thin. The family medicine cabinet, if you're lucky enough to have one, is a jumble of vials, powders, and objects of mysterious origin. There's laudanum, which is basically liquid opium, a popular cure-all prescribed for everything from toothaches to female troubles, and which works wonders right up until you slip into a dreamless Victorian sleep. If you're extra unlucky, someone might hand you a dose of castor oil to keep things moving, because nothing says comfort like a sudden, violent need for the chamber pot at 3 a.m. Herbal teas are another favourite. You're plied with infusions of chamomile, peppermint, or something called motherwort, which tastes like regret and boiled garden trimmings. Your great-aunt swears by a sprig of mugwort tucked into your corset, while your neighbour recommends drinking vinegar and holding a potato under your left armpit. No one knows why, but it worked for her cousin's friend, so you should try it, dear. If you're desperate, you might even listen to the local wise woman who lives 3 doors down and collects rainwater, cat hair, and rumours. She'll whip up a salve from whatever's growing in the hedgerow and apply it to your wrists, your temples, or, if she's feeling especially inspired, directly to your belly button. It draws out the humours, she'll say, as if that explains anything. Of course, the real danger is the doctor. If your symptoms are bad enough to warrant a visit from the local physician, brace yourself for a lecture about wandering wombs, excess blood, and the healing powers of a brisk walk. He might prescribe a female tonic laced with iron shavings, brandy, or good old-fashioned arsenic. Side effects include dizziness, nausea, and, occasionally, becoming a ghost. Then there are the food rules. You're told to avoid cold drinks, hot spices, fruit, pickles, and anything exciting. But definitely eat more beef, unless you're too pale, in which case beef is too rich. The rules are a moving target, and you're left craving whatever you're not allowed to have. Meanwhile, the one thing everyone agrees on is no excitement. No running, laughing, or reading sensational novels. Apparently, even Jane Eyre is too stimulating for a delicate constitution. And let's not forget the power of prayer and positive thinking. Your grandmother tells you to recite psalms. Your mother recommends breathing exercises and not thinking about your uterus at all. You try to meditate, but meditation hasn't really caught on yet, so you just stare at the ceiling and hope the pain decides to be Victorian and leave quietly. When all else fails, you're ushered to the fainting couch, a piece of furniture specifically designed for looking glamorous while incapacitated. Draped in your least itchy shawl, you sigh softly and hope someone brings you tea, but not too hot, not too cold, and definitely not with lemon. So you endure, caught between folklore and quackery, all the while wishing for a cure that actually works. In Victorian England, hope is cheap, but a hot water bottle is luxury. So you clutch your brick, sip your herbal disappointment, and resolve to avoid doctors, pickles, and your grandmother's advice for at least another month. If history has taught us anything, it's that suffering builds character, and Victorians were determined to build enough character to last for generations. Say goodbye to discreet packaging and adhesive strips. Here you have old rags, scraps of flannel, maybe a specially sewn pad if you're rich, and a whole lot of pins. You spend half the day adjusting, readjusting, and worrying you look like you're smuggling a sandwich down your bloomers. The Victorian era was not known for its subtlety, and nowhere is this more obvious than in the world of DIY period products. If you thought figuring out which pad to buy at the drugstore was stressful, imagine having to sort through a drawer of reclaimed linens, old handkerchiefs, bits of last year's nightgown, the slightly suspicious square that used to be part of a baby's nappy. Nothing matches, nothing fits, and nothing, absolutely nothing, comes with instructions. Step 1. Assemble your protection. Fold, roll, pin, and hope for the best. Some women get creative, sewing together layers of old flannel with bits of wool for extra absorbency, then pinning the whole contraption into their drawers with what can only be described as industrial optimism. If you're wealthy, or just especially handy, you might have access to the newest invention, the sanitary belt. This is a contraption featuring a canvas strap, a buckle, and a stern warning not to move too quickly, sneeze, or attempt stairs. Next comes the delicate operation of putting everything on. Victorian underwear is a full-body commitment. First, you wiggle into drawers, open crotch, for ease, though ease is a relative term here. Then you attempt to anchor your rag, pad, or prototype, sanitary device somewhere between secure and tourniquet. Too loose, and you'll be dealing with a wardrobe malfunction by lunch. Too tight, and you'll be walking like you've spent the morning riding a horse, side saddle, obviously. Now comes the fashion show. Skirt, petticoat, underskirt, overskirt, bodice, corset. You start the day upright, but after an hour of strategic shifting, you're convinced your period supplies have migrated somewhere around your left hip. You walk with the dignity of a lady and the anxious shuffling of someone trying to keep a sack of flour from falling out of their pant leg. Every creak of the floorboards is a fresh wave of paranoia. Let's talk about leakage anxiety. Victorian society was built on secrets, and nothing is more secret or scandalous than menstrual blood. Women cross their legs, perch on the edge of chairs, and perform subtle pelvic maneuvers that would make a yoga instructor proud, all in hopes of avoiding the ultimate humiliation, a visible stain on your only good skirt. If disaster does strike, you become an expert in the art of strategic shawl draping, or the sudden "I think I'll stand for the rest of the day" approach. There's no such thing as disposable. Used rags go into a special bucket. If you're lucky, it has a lid. Washing them is a process involving boiling water, strong soap, and a level of secrecy that would make a Victorian spy blush. You time your laundry for when the men of the house are busy or out, and you pray for rain to keep nosy neighbours inside. If drying must happen outside, you pin the cloths behind a row of socks and undergarments, hoping nobody recognises that suspiciously shaped square of flannel as their old handkerchief. If you're a servant or working class, you may not even have a change of rags, so you make do with what you have, and just hope for a light month. If you're upper class, your maid handles the messy work, but don't get too smug. She knows all your secrets and will absolutely mention them when negotiating a raise. Through all this, you endure with the stoic determination of someone who's survived every period product disaster known to man and invented a few new ones. Victorian ingenuity meets Victorian prudery, and the result is an exhausting, uncomfortable, and faintly ridiculous dance, all in the service of surviving another month. The monthly rag parade is a badge of endurance, one homemade, slightly soggy square at a time. When it comes to cleaning up, discretion is not just the better part of valor, it's a survival tactic. Boiling your rags in the kitchen, praying no one asks what's in the pot, and hanging everything up to dry while pretending you have no secrets at all. Victorian Laundry Day is a spectacle of stress and subterfuge, a ritual performed somewhere between a covert operation and a public confession. You tiptoe downstairs early, arms full of delicates wrapped tightly in a pillowcase, hoping to avoid your father's suspicious gaze and your siblings' relentless curiosity. The house is already bustling. Someone's clanging the coal scuttle, the baby's howling, and the dog is enthusiastically licking a suspicious patch of the floor. Your timing, as always, is terrible. You hustle into the kitchen and eye the big copper wash tub with the grim resignation of someone about to clean up both a mess and a reputation. The water must be hauled in bucket by bucket, then heated over a roaring fire that turns the whole room into a sauna with bonus steam burns. If you're lucky, you'll find a sliver of lye soap. If not, it's just you and elbow grease versus the monthly stains of doom. Next comes the moment of truth, lowering your rags into the boiling water and stirring them around like some kind of arcane potion. The smell is distinctive. Not quite laundry, not quite anything else, but with definite undertones of humiliation and lost innocence. If anyone asks, you insist it's just dishcloths. If they keep asking, you point out the window and change the subject. Something about Queen Victoria's dog always works. The entire time, you're haunted by the terrifying prospect that someone will walk in and spot your telltale bundle of fabric. Because, in Victorian England, a stained rag is a social landmine. It's not just about cleanliness, it's about secrecy, honour, and your place in the grand, judgy hierarchy of the household. If your brother sees your bundle, he'll never let you forget it. If your mother does, she'll lecture you about proper folding techniques and ask if you're eating enough beets. If the neighbour pops over and notices your wash, congratulations, your entire street will be whispering about you before tea. Drying is another strategic endeavour. Outdoor drying lines are a battleground. You hang the unmentionables behind the sheets, hoping a gust of wind doesn't whip them into full view. Sometimes you even sandwich your rags between layers of larger items, praying that Mrs. Carter next door can't distinguish between a menstrual rag and a common kitchen cloth. The tension is palpable. Every time a dog barks or a child shrieks, you're convinced your secret's been discovered. Washing machines don't exist, so it's all hard work. You scrub each rag on a wooden washboard until your knuckles are raw, silently cursing Eve, Queen Victoria, and anyone else who ever had a hand in the invention of womanhood. By the time you're finished, you smell of soap, sweat, and a very faint, lingering dread. Of course, the process is repeated for your underclothes and, if you weren't lucky during the night, for your sheets as well. Changing bed linens is an ordeal in itself, usually involving bribing a younger sibling or waiting for a rare moment when no one is watching. Sheets are precious and stains are forever, so you work with the tenacity of someone scrubbing for their very soul. Once everything is washed, dried, and folded, you retreat upstairs with your laundry bundle, trying to look nonchalant. It's a small victory, one that will go unacknowledged, except perhaps in the silent, knowing glance exchanged with your mother. Laundry day in Victorian England is a reminder. Discretion is survival, and surviving with a little dignity left is the real triumph. Just when you thought cramps couldn't get worse, someone hands you a corset. Now every muscle is in a tug of war. Your organs are playing musical chairs, and you're supposed to maintain perfect posture while pretending you're not dying. Victorian fashion is many things: elaborate, structured, and very, very enthusiastic about making sure you never draw a full, comfortable breath. If you're a woman of a certain class, your morning ritual involves not just battling menstrual pain, but stepping into a body cage designed by people who believed breathing freely was a sign of weak moral fibre. The family maid arrives with a bundle of fabric, a look of mild apology, and the kind of focus usually reserved for bomb disposal units. First, the chemise, a soft layer meant to keep your skin from being ravaged by everything that comes next. In theory, it's protective. In practice, it's just something else to sweat through. Then comes the corset, a construction of whalebone, steel, and pure historical spite. The maid laces you in, slowly, then with increasing determination. You grip the bedpost. You see stars. The phrase "tight enough to fit one finger" means her finger, not yours. A properly laced corset changes your whole relationship with time and space. Sitting down is a negotiation. Bending over is impossible unless you're double-jointed or don't mind popping a rib. And as for cramps, they don't disappear, they just get redistributed. Every twinge in your lower abdomen is now echoed by a symphony of pinches, jabs, and squeezes from your midsection. By midday, you're convinced your kidneys are trying to file for emancipation. But why stop at a corset? The Victorians adored layers. Over the corset goes a chemisette, for modesty naturally, then petticoats, maybe 2 or 3 depending on how cold the house is. After that, the crinoline, a wire hoop skirt the size of a small livestock enclosure. It's designed to hold your skirt out in the ideal fashionable bell shape, and is very effective at knocking over small tables, pets, and children. At this point, you are approximately 80% fabric, 10% anxiety, and 10% hoping you don't have to use the chamber pot before lunch. Let's not forget bloomers and drawers, tied at the waist and flapping somewhere beneath the crinoline, serving as a final reminder that easy access is a foreign concept in this house. Then finally, the dress itself. Heavy cotton, or, if you're unlucky, scratchy wool, with buttons up the back and sleeves so snug you wonder if you've accidentally slipped into a sausage casing. All this, of course, is happening while you are actively menstruating. Your period rags, pads, or the medieval torture device known as the menstrual belt have to be painstakingly adjusted under all these layers, and heaven help you if anything slips out of place. If you need to fix anything, you'll need at least 3 assistants, a prayer, and a privacy screen. Of course, you are expected to act normal, walk gracefully, sit up straight, and smile pleasantly while your internal organs are being forcibly introduced to your shoulder blades. If you faint, which is fairly common, someone fans you and assures the room it's just a touch of nerves. No one mentions that it might actually be a case of all my blood is currently trapped above my waist. By the end of the day, you're exhausted from fighting your own underwear, keeping your composure, and hiding your monthly misery. You peel off each layer with relief that borders on religious experience, vowing to run away and live as a hermit the next time someone says fashionable silhouette. But tomorrow, you'll do it all again, because that's Victorian progress, suffering with style, one rib at a time. The outside world awaits. You must navigate cobblestone streets, public omnibuses, and endless parlour visits, all while praying your homemade pad doesn't shift, leak, or, God forbid, fall out. Stepping out of the house during your period in Victorian England is an exercise in anxiety and balance, part ballet, part covert operation. You take one cautious step onto the cobblestones, feeling every uneven lump through the thin soles of your boots and the multiple, slippery layers underneath your skirts. Every jolt is a potential disaster, a test of how securely you manage to fasten everything before leaving home. Victorian roads are not so much roads as suggestions. Horse manure, puddles, and mysterious mud lurk in every gap, just waiting to splatter up your skirt and, with it, your confidence. The omnibuses are next, a lurching, jostling box on wheels, filled with strangers, gossip, and an unmistakable air of moral judgment. Climbing up is a delicate process, requiring you to hold your skirts with one hand and clutch your undergarments with the other, desperately hoping nothing decides to make a run for it. You find your seat, but not just any seat. No, you aim for a corner, back against the wall, away from sharp eyes and nosy neighbours. The goal: minimize shifting and maximize control. You cross your ankles and adopt the rigid posture of someone deeply invested in pretending everything is perfectly normal. Then there's the parlour visit, a beloved tradition involving hours of sitting upright on barely padded, unforgiving chairs in someone else's overheated drawing room. Conversation swirls around you. Talk of the weather, someone's rheumatism, the quality of the local fishmonger, but you're only half listening. The other half of your mind is fully occupied running hourly internal damage control. Has anything shifted? Can you feel a leak? Is your skirt still safely in place? Or has your rag begun its slow, inevitable migration south? You shift imperceptibly, a subtle recalibration every few minutes, part of the ancient art of Victorian feminine composure. Every time you move, there's the risk of a telltale sound, a quiet crinkle, a traitorous pin, or worse, the dreaded soft thud that signals something crucial has detached. Conversation might pause for just a moment as heads tilt in your direction. You smile, laugh lightly, and blame it on the cat, the wind, or the peculiar acoustics of the room. No one ever admits to hearing anything, but everyone heard everything. Public bathrooms are rare, and, when found, best described as experimental. You try to avoid them at all costs, but sometimes you have no choice. You enter a dim, chilly water closet that smells like a Victorian medical ward, and using skills that would impress a circus acrobat, attempt to adjust your layers without dropping anything vital onto the suspiciously damp floorboards. If you succeed, you emerge only slightly more disheveled than before, but with an even deeper appreciation for indoor plumbing. Then there's the social minefield of accidental stains. A slight brush against a white cushion, a too long sit on a friend's floral divan, and suddenly your entire day is dedicated to creative repositioning, shawl arranging, and, in extreme cases, inventing a spontaneous need to leave. All while maintaining the soft, bland smile of someone who has never, ever in her life experienced a bodily function. And let's not forget the relentless side-eye. Victorian society is always watching, always judging. A young man offers you a seat. You decline with a grateful smile, because you know better than to risk standing up in public if you can help it. Every older lady seems to see right through your carefully arranged layers. Every matron's eyebrow arches if you so much as twitch. By the end of the outing, you return home exhausted, your jaw aching from forced cheerfulness, your legs numb from strategic stillness, and your nerves frayed from the constant mental gymnastics. You survived another round of Victorian social life. No leaks, no stains, no scandal. Tomorrow, if you're lucky, you might just stay in and let the outside world gossip without you. If you're one of the few girls at school or a woman at work, congratulations, you get to pretend you're totally fine, always. No excuses. Need to sit down? That's just laziness. Fainting in class? The doctor will be by to suggest more fresh air and fewer novels. Welcome to the Victorian world of performance, where suffering in silence isn't just an expectation, it's a competitive sport. Schoolrooms are chilly, drafty, and lit by daylight if you're lucky or smoky oil lamps if you're not. Wooden desks creak, the floors are uneven, and privacy is an unattainable fantasy. You learn quickly that you must sit up straight, never squirm, and above all, never excuse yourself for anything as indecent as a lady's necessity. If you're a schoolgirl, the unwritten rules are as rigid as your corset. You come prepared, an extra rag or two stuffed discreetly up your sleeve, your best poker face firmly in place. Should disaster strike, a leak, a sudden cramp, a drop of blood on your stocking, your only hope is to keep perfectly still and pray to every saint you can remember. The teacher, almost always male, is far more likely to believe in spontaneous combustion than in the basic workings of the female body. Any hint of discomfort is met with suspicion or, worse, the announcement that you are being delicate. Girls whisper coded warnings behind their textbooks, passing secret signals or rescue supplies during brief, precious moments between lessons. Every friend is a potential ally in the battle against embarrassment, and every day is a gauntlet. If you're absent too often, you risk falling behind or being labelled as troublesome. If you try to explain why, prepare for a blank stare, a hasty change of subject, or an unsolicited sermon on the moral dangers of imagination. Best to simply endure. For women at work, the stakes are even higher. Whether you're a scullery maid, a factory worker, or a governess, the message is clear. You have one job, do not inconvenience anyone, ever. Taking a break is suspicious. Needing to sit down is indulgent. A grimace or wince earns you a reputation for weakness, so you grit your teeth and keep scrubbing, stitching, or teaching, all while feeling like your lower half is staging a coup. Factory work is its own special torture. Endless hours standing, bending, and lifting with a rag that shifts at the first hint of movement. There are no bathroom breaks, and certainly no private place to fix anything that goes wrong. You learn to walk with short, careful steps, clenching everything that can possibly be clenched, hoping to avoid the double humiliation of both a stain and your supervisor's scowl. Should you faint or slow down, a matron might offer a sniff of smelling salts, but mostly you'll get a lecture about robustness and the virtues of a good, brisk walk. Office jobs are only marginally better. The dress code is strict, tight collars, long sleeves, and layers upon layers of dark wool meant to hide, well, everything. Any visible discomfort or unladylike behavior is reported, discussed, and quietly held against you. If you ask for any special treatment, you may as well ask for the moon. And then there's the ever-present stigma. The unspoken rule that women's bodies are embarrassing and inconvenient, best hidden away and never discussed. Any slip, stain, or sign of discomfort risks not only your dignity but your very place in the social order. The angel in the house is expected to be tidy, cheerful, and eternally composed, even when the reality is more howling banshee than heavenly choir. So you soldier on. You master the art of silent suffering, secret signals, and stoic smiles. And at the end of the day, you return home exhausted, grateful for every moment you can let your guard down, even if it's just for a minute, behind a locked bedroom door. In Victorian England, surviving school or work while menstruating isn't just about hygiene, it's about becoming an Olympic-level actor in the world's least forgiving play. Victorian doctors had the bedside manner of a disappointed vicar, and about as much understanding of female anatomy. The prescription for cramps? Laudanum, arsenic, female pills, or just a brisk walk and a stern talk about nerves. The average medical visit in Victorian England is less about health, and more about navigating a maze of ignorance with a polite smile. If you're suffering from cramps, headaches, or any of the charming symptoms that come with menstruation, prepare yourself for a consultation that begins with your doctor peering over his spectacles as if you've just confessed to witchcraft. He'll nod sagely, ask if you've been reading too many novels, and may jot something in a notebook that looks suspiciously empty. The diagnosis is almost always hysteria, a catch-all term for anything women experience that men do not understand. Cramps, fatigue, mood swings, fainting, or the desire for 5 minutes of peace, all conveniently swept under the grand medical rug labelled female problems. Hysteria was thought to be caused by a wandering womb, a mythical internal balloon that floated around looking for trouble. If you weren't careful, your uterus might just drift up and interfere with your sense of duty. If you're lucky, you'll be sent home with a bottle of laudanum, pure opium in a friendly brown bottle. 1 teaspoon, the doctor says, and you'll sleep through your symptoms and possibly the next 3 days. If you're less lucky, he might recommend female pills, which could contain anything from iron shavings to strychnine. Guaranteed to restore feminine vigor, the label promises. May also cause convulsions, headaches, or an overwhelming sense of existential dread, it does not say. For the truly unfortunate, the doctor might pull out the leeches. Yes, leeches. The original Victorian spa treatment. You lie back while the physician arranges a handful of small wriggling creatures around your lower abdomen. They're meant to draw out the excess blood. In reality, they mostly draw out your will to live and any remaining faith in modern medicine. Don't want leeches? The alternative is sometimes bleeding, a deliberate nick with a knife, followed by the collection of several ounces of your blood in a bowl. Afterward, you're given a glass of brandy and advised to think less about your troubles. Nothing soothes menstrual cramps like dehydration and a gentle reminder to keep your thoughts cheerful. If you complain of back pain or mood swings, be prepared for a lecture on female nerves. Doctors believe that reading, writing, or even thinking too much can inflame the female system. Avoid novels, they say. Perhaps a little fresh air and needlework will calm your constitution. Never mind that your uterus feels like it's hosting a Greco-Roman wrestling match. You must simply compose yourself and strive to be less, well, female. For some women, the doctor's visit is a last resort, only attempted after exhausting every home remedy and superstition in the book. Others are dragged by worried mothers or employers who fear that the girl has gone odd. Either way, you leave the doctor's office with the distinct impression that you're not so much a patient as a puzzle. A puzzle, incidentally, that no one is terribly interested in solving. It's not all bleak, though. Sometimes the cure really is rest, lying quietly in a dim room while servants tiptoe around and relatives debate whether your colouring looks healthier. Occasionally, someone offers you a cup of weak tea and doesn't ask any questions. These small mercies, more than the bottles of dubious medicine, are the real prescription for Victorian womanhood. So you return home with your bottle of laudanum, your female pills, or just the same stubborn cramps you started with. The only thing that's really changed is your opinion of doctors. But don't worry, next month you'll get to try the whole ridiculous routine again. You're expected to conceal all evidence of your monthly misery, especially from your husband. If you're newlywed, good luck explaining why you're hiding blood-stained linens like you're auditioning for a murder mystery. In Victorian England, marriage comes with a long list of unspoken rules, and never mention your period is scrawled in invisible ink at the very top. The polite fiction is that married life is a tranquil domestic dream, charming firesides, embroidered cushions, and the soft glow of candlelight. In reality, half the candles are burning so you can scrub period stains out of the bedsheets before anyone notices. Housekeeping manuals devote pages to removing unfortunate spots, but never actually say what caused them. It's the world's worst-kept secret, spoken of only in whispers and laundry room side glances. The first real test comes the morning after your monthly visitor arrives. You wake up, feel that unmistakable sensation, and immediately transform into a covert agent. You must smuggle your stained linens out of the bedroom before your husband wakes. If you're lucky, he's an early riser or a heavy sleeper. If not, you invent a sudden urge to check the kitchen fire, sweep him out the door with a cheerful, enjoy your walk, and pray he doesn't decide to come back for his slippers. If discovery is imminent, you master the art of distraction. A strategically placed nightgown, a mound of decorative pillows, or, if you're truly desperate, a well-placed cat. Anything to keep prying eyes from your evidence. If all else fails, you develop a convincing headache. Headaches, in Victorian England, are the Swiss Army knife of female excuses. They'll get you out of dinner, church, and, most importantly, conjugal duties. Speaking of which, intimacy and menstruation are topics so taboo they might as well be classified information. Husbands are often blissfully ignorant of the details, and society prefers to keep it that way. If your husband is especially sensitive, or squeamish, a single spot on the sheets is enough to cause a diplomatic incident. You're left murmuring about delicate matters, hoping he doesn't ask for clarification. Should you have to turn down his advances, a well-timed cough or an elaborate story about womanly ailments is usually sufficient. No one questions a woman who claims to be suffering from her nerves. Older women, mothers, and aunts occasionally pass down their hard-won wisdom in the form of whispered advice and laundry tips. Soak the sheets in cold water first, your mother might say, or always keep an old towel nearby, just in case. Their tone suggests they're sharing the secret to the crown jewels, not basic hygiene. Husbands, on the other hand, are kept on a strict need-to-know basis, and the preferred level of knowledge is none. Yet, despite all these precautions, sometimes the secret gets out. Maybe a bloodstain escapes your careful folding. Maybe you're caught carrying a suspicious bundle down the hallway. Or maybe, horror of horrors, your husband tries to help with the laundry. The resulting awkwardness could power the entire national grid. If he's considerate, he pretends not to notice. If he's clueless, he asks questions you have no intention of answering, and you both agree to never speak of this again. For Victorian women, marriage is a partnership, one part love, one part housekeeping, and 5 parts elaborate cover-up. You become an expert at code switching, body blocking, and the fine art of not tonight, dear. And through it all, you hold on to your dignity with both hands, secure in the knowledge that next month, the cycle of secrets, scandal, and sudden headaches will begin anew. It's exhausting, it's absurd, and it's exactly as dignified as history requires. In Victorian England, surviving marriage while menstruating is less about romance and more about strategy, and the winner is the one who keeps the most secrets clean. Public bathrooms are rare, filthy, and designed by people who never considered women might need to use them. You hover, you pray, you make eye contact with God. First, let's talk about the concept of public convenience, a phrase that's almost entirely theoretical in Victorian England, especially if you're female. In theory, the Victorians are very big on public order and cleanliness. In practice, public toilets are the stuff of nightmares. If you're in a city, you might find a grandly titled retiring room, usually hidden somewhere between the fishmonger and the world's loudest newsboy. If you're in the countryside, you're looking at bushes, trees, or a suspiciously quiet alleyway, all of which are a gamble for your dignity, your skirts, and your laundry situation. The rare indoor public toilet is a marvel of bad planning. There are lines, of course, mostly women shifting awkwardly from foot to foot, clutching handbags and glancing around for any sign of hope. You get closer and realize with mounting dread that these facilities are designed by men for men and retrofitted for women as an afterthought, if at all. The door's never quite close. There's rarely a lock. And the gap at the bottom is wide enough to see 3 sets of muddy boots and the occasional rat, which is, arguably, the cleanest thing you'll encounter in the entire experience. Stepping inside is like entering a haunted wardrobe. The smell hits first, a wall of ammonia and regret, with undertones of despair and old cabbage. The floor is always wet, the source unknown and best left unimagined. You tiptoe, mindful of your many, many skirts which billow out and threaten to brush every unspeakable surface. You clutch them with one hand and try, with the other, to navigate whatever primitive arrangement has been provided. Sometimes it's a hole in a bench, sometimes a ceramic chamber pot, and sometimes just a suggestion that you aim carefully and keep your eyes shut. Hovering is your only hope. You grip the wall, arrange your layers, and engage every muscle you didn't know you had. Victorian fashion offers no support here. Corset, petticoats, underskirt, drawers, all must be hiked, balanced, and coordinated like the world's least glamorous ballet. If you're managing your period, the stakes are even higher. One slip, and your carefully pinned protection could land anywhere, or worse, unravel completely. It's a game of high tension and even higher stakes. To make matters worse, there is no toilet paper, at least not the kind you're hoping for. If you're lucky, there's a communal rag or a stack of newspaper clippings that once featured the exploits of Queen Victoria herself. You use them sparingly, with the kind of reverence normally reserved for sacred relics, and hope you don't run out. Emerging is its own ordeal. There's no sink, only a chipped water pitcher and a rag that's seen better centuries. You splash, you dab, you make do. Then you rearrange your layers, shake out your skirts, and pray nothing vital was left behind. If anyone's waiting, you exit with a blank expression, as though nothing traumatic just occurred. Back out on the street, you breathe the sweet, polluted London air and vow never to drink tea in public again. But of course you will, because you're Victorian, and suffering in silence is what you do best. You rejoin your friends, smile politely, and never, ever speak of what happened in the public convenience. It becomes just another secret, layered under your petticoats, to be handled with dignity and a lot of silent, mutual understanding. In Victorian England, using a public toilet isn't just a test of bodily control. It's a masterclass in patience, fortitude, and the fine art of pretending nothing ever happened. And as you walk away, you know you've survived another day in history's most inconvenient era. There's no CVS run. Instead, you mumble your needs to a disapproving chemist who may or may not slip you a bottle of something that's 10% opium, and 90% wishful thinking. Shopping for period supplies in Victorian England is less self-care and more social obstacle course. For starters, you don't exactly announce your intentions. There's no feminine hygiene aisle, no gentle pastel branding, no basket of ultra-discreet options to compare. Instead, you wrap yourself in your most sensible shawl, steel your nerves, and walk briskly to the nearest apothecary, eyes down, looking as inconspicuous as someone hiding a catastrophic secret under 3 petticoats possibly can. The apothecary is a marvel of discomfort. Shelves stacked with bottles of liniment, jars of pickled leeches, and mysterious powders, all presided over by a man with bushy eyebrows and a deep distrust of female ailments. You stand awkwardly, waiting for a gap in customers so you can whisper your request. If you're lucky, the place is empty. If you're not, the local busybody is buying cough syrup and stretching her errand to Olympic lengths. Finally, it's your turn. You lean in, drop your voice to a near inaudible murmur, and ask for something for the nerves or a tonic for women's troubles. This is code. Everyone knows what you mean, but no one will ever say the word period out loud. The chemist sighs, shuffles into the back, and returns with a bottle wrapped in brown paper and an unspoken agreement that this never happened. If you're bold or desperate, you might ask for pain relief. The pharmacist produces laudanum, again, basically liquid opium, recommended for headaches, cramps, toothaches, existential dread, and, possibly, convincing you that Victorian medicine is working. The label says, "Take sparingly." The subtext is, "Try not to get addicted, and good luck waking up before Thursday." Other remedies include female pills, herbal teas, and something called Dr. Somebody's soothing syrup, which contains a medley of ingredients that are either mildly helpful or mildly toxic. None of it is actually designed for menstrual pain, but it will at least make you sleepy enough to forget your uterus for a little while. There's also the matter of supplies, rags, flannel, safety pins. These aren't exactly sitting out in a bin labelled monthly essentials. You buy fabric at the draper's, trying not to blush when the shopkeeper asks what you're making. You mutter something about handkerchiefs, baby clothes, or a project which is only half a lie. Pins and bandages are just as complicated. "For my brother," you say, or "the dog keeps getting into scrapes." The less detail, the better. All the while, you're painfully aware of the other customers, who seem to be listening just a bit too closely. The shop bell rings, the door creaks, and you nearly jump out of your shoes. It's just Mrs. Harcourt from 2 doors down. She gives you a smile that says, "I know exactly what you're doing, dear," but thankfully she'll never say it out loud. When the transaction is done, the chemist hands over your mysterious package with a knowing nod. You stash it in your basket, beneath a loaf of bread and a copy of the Times, and scurry home as quickly as Victorian decorum allows. You finally arrive back at the house, a little out of breath, clutching your precious bundle of secret solutions. The stress of shopping fades as you close the door behind you, until next month, when the whole anxious performance begins again. Because in Victorian England, shopping while bleeding is not just a chore. It's a lesson in code words, social manoeuvring, and the endless dance of pretending everything is perfectly, respectably normal, even when it absolutely isn't. Scented handkerchiefs, lavender sachets, and layers upon layers of perfume, anything to mask the evidence. Meanwhile, the city itself smells like a sewer, so maybe you have some cover. Welcome to the delicate and highly scented art of not smelling like a human being in Victorian England. The world is full of odours, horses, coal smoke, damp wool, unwashed bodies, and the sweet stench of the Thames at low tide. Inside your own home, the air is a fugue of boiled cabbage, wet laundry, and whatever your brother dragged in from the street. It's enough to make you grateful that nobody expects you to smell like a rose, except, of course, when it comes to your period. Victorian anxieties about bodily odour were matched only by their ingenuity in creating solutions that didn't work. For women, the idea that someone, anyone, might catch a whiff of something untoward was enough to spark a lifetime of nervous sniffing and compulsive sachet stuffing. The result? A personal cloud of scent so dense you could lose a small pet in it. It all starts with the handkerchief. No proper lady leaves home without a dainty square of linen doused in rosewater or violet perfume, ready to press to her nose at the first hint of trouble, be it a passing refuse cart or her own secret anxieties. Scented handkerchiefs are wielded with the casual expertise of a gambler fanning a hand of aces. If you're really worried, you double up, one in each hand, and maybe a third hidden in your sleeve. Next come the sachets. Every drawer and wardrobe is packed with little pouches of lavender, crushed bay leaves, and dried lemon peel. Some women take things even further, tucking sachets into their underclothes, pinning them between layers, or sewing a small odor pouch into their corset. If you think that sounds uncomfortable, you're correct, but the alternative is worse. Public humiliation, or, even more mortifying, a whispered comment from your mother-in-law. Perfume is not just a luxury, it's survival gear. Victorian chemists outdid themselves, producing scents in every possible flavour. Rose, lilac, patchouli, sandalwood and musk, sometimes all at once. The goal is simple. Out. Smell everyone and everything, including your own underarm and under everything situation. You dab perfume behind your ears, at your wrists, and on the edge of every layer. The result is something between a flower market and a chemical spill. At least, you tell yourself, nobody will notice anything else. But beneath the mountain of scents, the anxiety remains. What if someone notices is the silent refrain of Victorian womanhood. The truth is, with all the city's competing odours, chimney smoke, horse dung, human effluent, and a general lack of plumbing, you're more likely to be mistaken for a passing cheese cart than to be singled out for a faint feminine whiff. Still, you live in fear. Etiquette books devote whole chapters to the dangers of personal odour, with strict instructions about daily ablutions, changing linen, and never, ever airing your unmentionables in public, especially not your menstrual rags. Inside the home, there's little relief. Water is scarce, baths are rare, and hot water is a treasure. Most women make do with sponging off at the washstand, dabbing at themselves with cold water and soap if they're lucky. If not, a brisk rub with vinegar is supposed to help. Whether it does or not is debatable. Mostly it just makes you smell like you lost a fight with a pickle jar. And so you soldier on, enveloped in a protective cloud of floral subterfuge, always alert for a whiff of disaster. The irony, of course, is that nobody is expecting you to be odourless in a world where even the Queen's own palace was said to reek of drains. But this is Victorian England. Appearances are everything, and you will wear your perfume like armour, your handkerchief at the ready, and your anxiety is the one scent that never fades. In the end, managing odour isn't about success, it's about survival. You blend in with the haze, breathe deeply or not, and remind yourself that at least, in this one arena, you're no worse off than everyone else. For many, menstruation is a theological issue. You might be told to avoid communion, keep to yourself, or just repent for the crime of being alive. God apparently has very strong opinions about your cycle. Victorian England is a time and place where religion is not just a Sunday affair, it's the background music of everyday life. Bells ring out for morning prayers, the local vicar strolls the streets in perpetual judgment, and every family has at least one aunt who could quote scripture faster than you can say monthly visitor. In this world, your body's natural functions are not just private, they are, according to certain enthusiastic clergymen, a test of your moral fibre. Menstruation, of course, sits squarely at the centre of this holy minefield. Ancient beliefs about uncleanliness cling to the Victorian era like dust on the altar cloths. There are passages in Leviticus that get more airplay than the Queen's speeches, and most of them revolve around exactly how impure you are while bleeding. The result? Even as medical science is crawling, very slowly, into the modern age, the Church is determined to make sure you know your place. Somewhere out of sight, slightly ashamed, and definitely not at the front of the communion line. If you're Catholic or Anglican, you may be quietly advised by mother, priest, or both to sit out the Eucharist just in case. Participation in church life, while on your period, is a matter of delicate negotiation. Want to join the parish bake sale? Only if you can do so without contaminating the scones with your sinful aura. Feel like singing in the choir? Maybe just hum quietly from the back pew this week. And if you accidentally reveal your condition by, say, fainting mid-sermon or sneaking off to the washroom more than once, you'll be the subject of whispered prayers and even louder gossip. The prevailing wisdom is that menstruation is a time of reflection, humility, and, ideally, invisibility. Women are encouraged to focus on their souls and leave the visible world of church business to the men who, incidentally, would rather discuss the details of animal husbandry than acknowledge that periods exist. Etiquette books advise silence and discretion. No mention of those days should ever reach polite company, and certainly never a male ear. Within the home, the theology is just as suffocating. If you're moody, tired, or short-tempered, you're told to pray harder and offer your suffering up for the good of your soul. Cramps are a spiritual trial. Fatigue is a divine test. If you ask for hot water or a moment to lie down, you risk being branded as lazy, or worse, as indulging in self-pity. After all, what is a little physical pain compared to the noble agony of a Victorian martyr? For many, these unclean days are a sentence to the background of spiritual life. You find yourself drifting on the edges of family prayers, hovering at the back of the church, or simply staying home to avoid the entire ordeal. There's a certain relief in skipping communion. No need to explain yourself, no risk of stained church pews, but also a deep sense of exclusion. Faith, you're told, is for everyone, unless you're menstruating, in which case, maybe try again next week. Of course, every rule has its loopholes. Some women quietly rebel, participating as normal and daring anyone to call them out. Others maintain elaborate networks of prayer partners who cover for them or bring back news from the church. You learn to adapt, to subvert, to survive with your dignity and your faith intact. In the end, Victorian church life teaches you one thing above all. Guilt comes in monthly installments. You learn to blend faith with endurance, prayer with pragmatism, and hope with a healthy sense of humour. God may have opinions, but so do you, and you're determined to keep showing up, no matter what the vicar, your aunt, or Leviticus has to say about it. If you're rich, you have silk rags, servants who do the dirty work, and maybe a fainting couch with your name on it. But social rules are even stricter, and a single slip could mean exile from polite society, or at least some very pointed fan-fluttering. Welcome to the upstairs world of Victorian menstruation, where luxury doesn't mean freedom, just more expensive ways to be anxious. Your bedroom is twice the size of a working-class home, the wallpaper is imported from Paris, and the fire is always stoked, but the monthly rituals of concealment are as exhausting as ever. Everything, from your period rags to your rest cures, is made of finer material but enforced with the kind of discipline usually reserved for military parades. Let's begin with supplies. Your rags are sewn from silk or the softest linen, the kind that never itches and always absorbs just enough to keep you worried. Servants, specifically your lady's maid, are responsible for laundering, boiling, and carefully hiding any evidence of your monthly ordeal. There's a silent, ironclad pact between maid and mistress. She will not speak a word about what she sees, and you will pretend that the silk squares she collects from under your bed are just unusually colourful handkerchiefs. But this elevated comfort comes at a cost. In high society, the rules are stricter, the gossip sharper, and the consequences much more dire. Social calendars are crowded with luncheons, teas, dinner parties, and the dreaded all-day garden promenade. You're expected to be gracious, lively, and, above all, completely untroubled by earthly concerns. Looking pale, your aunt whispers, eyes darting over your ensemble, "Perhaps you should take a little air." Translation: fix your face, fix your mood, and don't mention the unspeakable. Every aspect of life is a performance. Your fainting couch, upholstered in brocade and strategically positioned under a sunbeam, is more than just a place to collapse during a wave of cramps. It's a stage prop. If you must retire, you do so with practiced elegance, summoning your maid with a discreet bell and issuing vague orders for my restorative salts. The goal is to suggest you are suffering from something mysterious, fashionable, and entirely unrelated to bodily functions. Underneath all the elegance is a relentless awareness that the slightest mishap could bring disgrace. If a single spot appears on your evening gown, it's not just laundry, it's a crisis. Your maid springs into action with salt, cold water, and nervous energy. But you know that one slip could become the talk of the next 3 garden parties. And don't even think about leaving a stained cushion behind in someone else's drawing room. That's a scandal that could haunt your reputation until your dying day. High society has its own coded language for these things. Feeling indisposed, suffering from a nervous malaise, or in need of a restful fortnight. These phrases waft through ballrooms and parlours, delivered with the subtlety of a perfume commercial but understood by every woman present. Men, of course, remain willfully ignorant, preferring to imagine that ladies exist in a permanent state of lavender-scented serenity. Then there are the social expectations. You must attend events, even if you'd rather be locked away with a hot brick and a volume of poetry. Skipping a dinner is a diplomatic maneuver, requiring notes from doctors, excuses from mothers, and assurances that you're not contagious, just fragile. Meanwhile, you pray your corset doesn't squeeze out any secrets, and your protection holds up under the weight of etiquette and ostrich feathers. When the day finally ends, you slip upstairs, grateful for privacy and a moment to exhale. Behind closed doors, you may clutch a hot water bottle, groan into a silk pillow, or just laugh at the absurdity of it all. Because being rich in Victorian England means everything is polished, elegant, and absolutely unmentionable, including the most basic realities of womanhood. And so, high society ladies survive each month with a blend of discretion, discipline, and desperate prayer. Exile isn't just a social consequence, it's a state of perpetual vigilance, and the only thing sharper than your cramps is the ever-present threat of a very public, very fashionable disaster. If you're poor, your period is just one more thing to manage while you haul water, clean houses, or work in a factory. No time off, no sympathy, and no chance to buy new rags when the old ones finally fall apart. For the Victorian poor, menstruation is neither a mystery nor a polite fiction. It's a fact of life, inconvenient and unavoidable. Privacy is something you've only read about in the Bible, and comfort is a distant rumor. You share a single-room home with your entire family, including at least 2 siblings who think nothing of rifling through your things, and a mother whose definition of personal space begins and ends with the edge of your straw mattress. Your period supplies, such as they are made from whatever can be scrounged or salvaged: torn flannel shirts, scraps of old blankets, even bits of newspaper if you're truly desperate. Nothing is fresh. Nothing is absorbent, and everything itches. When a rag finally disintegrates, you patch it, tie it in a knot, and keep going. The concept of sanitary products is a fairy tale, one reserved for the ladies in the big houses, not for women who spend their days elbow deep in other people's laundry. The working day does not pause for pain. If you're a maid, you scrub floors, carry coal, and polish silver with the quiet desperation of someone who can't afford to stop for even a moment. Cramps are ignored, leaks are camouflaged, and if you're lucky enough to have a day off, it's probably because your employer is out of town, not because anyone cares about your monthly agony. In the factories, the situation is even bleaker. You stand for 12 hours at a loom or assembly line, hunched over in a room packed with bodies and the endless clatter of machines. The air is thick with dust and lint. Your only bathroom break comes at the mercy of a supervisor, and the facilities, if they exist at all, are little more than a shared bucket behind a wooden screen. Changing your rag is a covert operation, performed with the speed and subtlety of a Victorian stage magician. You pray you don't drop anything vital, because anything that hits the floor is probably gone forever. At home, laundry is a Herculean ordeal. Water must be hauled from the pump down the street and heated over a smoky fire. Soap is precious, so you use as little as possible, scrubbing your rags and underclothes until your hands are red and raw. Drying is another challenge. There's no private yard, only a shared line in a filthy alley where your business is everyone's business. You hang your rags as discreetly as you can, wedged between socks and baby clothes, hoping the neighbour's nosy children don't decide to investigate. There is no room for modesty. Everyone sees everything, and while there is a quiet code among women, averted eyes, the occasional shared scrap of cloth, there's no escaping the sense that you are always on display. Any sign of laziness or discomfort is quickly reported to your employer or landlord, and you risk losing your job if you can't work through the pain. Menstruation is a nuisance, but it's one that must never be mentioned, let alone allowed to interfere with your duties. And yet, despite the constant discomfort, there is a grim camaraderie. You and the other working women swap tips, rags, and the occasional hard-won moment of laughter at the absurdity of it all. There's a certain pride in survival, in making do, in refusing to let the indignities of poverty and biology break you. The Victorian poor may have had no privacy, no comfort, and certainly no mercy. But they had resilience, and sometimes, when the work is done and the house is quiet, a sense of quiet triumph just for having made it through another month. The concept of cleanliness is theoretical at best. Bathing is infrequent, water is cold, and soap is expensive. You do your best with what you have, but mostly you hope everyone else smells just as bad. In Victorian England, the pursuit of hygiene is an endurance sport with rules designed by people who never had to follow them. For starters, water is not your friend. It's a luxury. If you live in the city, you haul it up narrow stairs from the pump in the street, hoping the neighbour's children haven't muddied it first. If you live in the countryside, you trek out to the nearest well or stream, dodging geese and suspicious stares. Either way, it takes a Herculean effort just to fill the basin. By the time you have enough water for a proper wash, you're so tired you wonder if filth is simply more practical. Hot water? That's a pipe dream, literally. Water must be boiled on the stove, which means collecting coal, tending a fire, and then pouring the steaming contents into a drafty tin tub in the middle of the kitchen. Bath night is an event, best planned for when company is not expected and everyone's in a forgiving mood. Most families reuse the same bath water, so by the time it's your turn, you're sharing your ablutions with everyone else's grime, soap scum, and whatever the family cat left behind. Soap is another obstacle. Imported, taxed, and often adulterated with chalk or lye, it's precious and rationed. You use it sparingly, working up a thin lather and hoping it doesn't sting. The cheap stuff leaves your skin raw. The fancy stuff is locked away for Christmas or emergencies. Some days you make do with ash and water, which is about as refreshing as it sounds. When it comes to menstrual hygiene, the challenges multiply. Changing rags and underclothes without attracting attention is a tactical mission. You splash cold water from the basin, wring out your cloths, and hang them in the least conspicuous spot you can find. Privacy is limited to the few seconds you can claim in the scullery or behind a closed bedroom door, always listening for the telltale creak of footsteps outside. The full-body bath is a rare treat. More often, you top and tail, a brisk dab at face, armpits, and the parts your mother insists must be kept respectable. Everything else is left to fate, perfume, and layers of clothing. You hope that if you can't smell yourself, nobody else can either. This is a time before deodorant, before running water, before the miracle of wet wipes. Personal fragrance comes courtesy of a lavender sachet, a spritz of odor cologne, or, on rough days, a generous application of denial. Public bathhouses exist in the city but come with their own set of challenges. They're crowded, noisy, and, thanks to a lack of regulation, only marginally cleaner than the Thames. Some people swear by them, others avoid them entirely, citing rumours of disease and the ever-present threat of being seen in your underthings by a neighbour, or worse, a potential suitor. But, as with most things Victorian, you make do. There's a camaraderie in collective hardship, a resigned acceptance that everyone is equally grubby and equally desperate for a better solution. On wash days, women swap soap scraps, commiserate over water shortages, and joke that the Queen herself probably hasn't had a proper bath in months. Misery loves company, and sometimes it even smells like it. By the end of the day, you're left with the faint satisfaction of having done your best, plus a lingering hope that, by next month, someone will finally invent indoor plumbing. Until then, you muddle through with cold water, rationed soap, and the small comfort that you are not alone in your unwashed, unbothered state. In Victorian England, hygiene is relative, effort is everything, and your only real hope is that the neighbour's perfume is just as strong as yours. Don't ride a horse, don't read novels, don't eat pickles. Victorian advice about periods ranges from the quaint to the truly deranged. Spoiler: none of it helps, but some of it is hilarious. Victorian England was an era of scientific progress on the surface and wild superstition underneath, especially when it came to women's health. Periods, in particular, were the subject of a medical and moral guessing game that makes modern wellness influencers look like Nobel Prize winners. For every ounce of actual advice, there were 100 of myths passed down by mothers, aunts, doctors, and ladies' magazines that specialized in keeping women mystified and slightly terrified. Let's start with the basics. Physical activity. One of the most widespread myths was that riding a horse while menstruating could lead to, depending on the source, a prolapsed uterus, fainting spells, or simply the vapors. Walking briskly was fine, as long as you didn't look too enthusiastic. Climbing stairs? Only with measured restraint. As for dancing, especially the waltz, it was considered both thrilling and deeply dangerous for a woman in a delicate state. The risk? Spontaneous combustion, or worse, gossip. Then there were the food prohibitions. Victorian women were sternly warned not to eat pickles, oranges, shellfish, or anything exciting during their period, on the theory that spicy or sour foods would agitate the blood. Instead, you were urged to consume bland broths and boiled vegetables, all of which tasted like regret. Craving a slice of fruitcake? Not unless you wanted to risk disturbing the female equilibrium. Chocolate was tragically not yet recognized for its true medicinal value. Literature was another dangerous indulgence. Reading novels, especially the sensational kind, was blamed for everything from mood swings to full-blown hysteria. The act of getting emotionally involved with fictional characters was said to overstimulate the nerves, making your period heavier, longer, and morally suspect. Young ladies caught reading Jane Eyre during that time of the month were liable to get both a lecture and a cold compress for their overheated brains. And then came the truly creative advice. Don't look at the moon, as it could disrupt the female cycles. Don't touch flowers, lest you wilt them. Don't bake bread or churn butter, or you'd sour the batch and attract evil spirits. Some rural communities believed that a menstruating woman could curdle milk just by standing in the same room as a cow. One pamphlet warned against sewing or mending clothing because you might unravel your strength. It's a wonder anyone got dressed at all. The list of don'ts grew longer the more you asked. Don't laugh too loudly, or you'd loosen your organs. Don't argue with your husband, as it could cause lasting marital discord. Don't cry, don't swim, don't look too long in the mirror, don't go out after sunset, and, above all, don't talk about any of this with a man. The only advice more firmly enforced than don't was don't ask questions. The remedies for period woes were equally mystical. You might be told to place a silver coin under your pillow, wear red ribbons on your wrists, or burn dried sage in the parlour. A sprinkle of holy water in your bath could allegedly keep you pure of spirit, though it did nothing for your cramps. If you did everything right and still suffered, it was simply the will of Providence, or proof you'd been reading too many penny dreadfuls. And yet, in the face of all these myths, Victorian women found their own way forward. They swapped forbidden foods, shared contraband novels, and laughed, quietly, so as not to loosen their organs, at the ridiculousness of it all. Beneath the layers of superstition was a sly, stubborn resilience, the unspoken knowledge that most of these rules were nonsense and that sometimes the best medicine was a friend who rolled her eyes along with you. In the end, the only thing more persistent than period myths was the quiet determination of the women who endured them, and occasionally broke them just for the thrill. If you're unlucky enough to have a leak in front of family, the drama is Shakespearean. Mothers lecture, sisters roll their eyes, fathers go silent and disappear into the garden for an hour. It is a truth universally acknowledged in any Victorian household that the appearance of blood where it shouldn't be is an event worthy of a three-act play. The culprit is usually a rogue rag, a treacherous pin, or the sheer, cruel luck of sitting down too quickly on the parlour's only pale cushion. What follows is a family performance, so familiar it ought to be included in etiquette handbooks, except, of course, it never is. First, the maternal response. Your mother, who has seen it all and survived it all, launches into a lecture both timeless and oddly personal. She recounts her own mortifying episodes. It was 1849, your great-aunt Beatrice's wedding. There was a goose involved. Before pivoting to an impromptu masterclass on the fine art of stain concealment. Always carry a shawl, she hisses, handing you the nearest one and urging you to knot it around your waist. She'll talk for 20 minutes about cold water, salt, and the perils of cheap fabric, all while fussing with your skirt and scanning the room for witnesses. Your sisters, meanwhile, provide the Greek chorus. Older ones may feign deep, world-weary sighs, again, while younger ones look on with a mix of horror and fascination. If you're lucky, there's sympathy and perhaps a shared stash of rags or pins. If not, prepare for smirks, secret signals, and the knowledge that this will be family gossip well into your dotage. You might even inspire a new household code word for disaster, as in, don't sit there, someone's had a Beatrice. The real tension, though, comes with the patriarch. Victorian fathers, otherwise fond of expounding on politics, poetry, or the best way to chop wood, find themselves speechless at the faintest mention of female biology. A spotted cushion, a folded handkerchief, or even a daughter's sudden flight from the room is enough to make him retreat outdoors with the determination of a man fleeing a small fire. He'll reappear hours later, looking dignified but refusing to meet anyone's eye, as though the hydrangeas needed a stern talking to. In some households, there's an unspoken agreement to handle these matters quietly. A sudden flurry of laundry, a reshuffled seating arrangement, and everyone pretends nothing happened. But the truth is, the memory lingers. Family secrets, especially those tinged with embarrassment, are sticky things. Your brothers may be too young to understand, but old enough to repeat anything overheard. Your mother's best friend may hear about the incident before you've even finished blotting the stain. This secrecy breeds a strange sort of camaraderie among the women of the house. Mothers and daughters, aunts and cousins share stories, advice, and the occasional badly timed joke. After all, if you can't laugh at the absurdity, you're left only with the shame. There's even a certain relief in knowing you're not alone. Leaks happen, stains happen, and the world somehow keeps spinning, albeit with a few more shawls and slightly less innocence. Still, the pressure is real. You're reminded constantly to be careful, sit straight, and keep your knees together, as if perfect posture alone could prevent the natural disasters of adolescence. The message is clear. Spills and stains are not just accidents, they're failures of vigilance. Reminders that womanhood is a high-wire act where balance, discretion, and a bit of luck are your only safety nets. Yet, through the mortification and melodrama, you learn. You get smarter about where to sit, how to disguise an emergency, which cousin can be trusted, and which sibling will sell you out for an extra biscuit. And somewhere between the lectures, the sighs, and the silent fathers, you start to find humor in the madness, a badge of survival, passed down like the family recipe for removing stains. Because in a Victorian home, blood is never just blood. It's a lesson, a warning, and, once everyone's gone to bed, the family secret everyone already knows. On rare occasions, someone comes up with a remedy that kind of almost maybe works. Hot water bottles, herbal teas, and lying perfectly still in a dark room, praying your uterus just gives up. If you're a Victorian woman seeking relief from cramps, you don't exactly have a lot of options, or at least not a lot that actually do what they're supposed to. Most suggestions come from a combination of folk wisdom, trial and error, and sheer desperation. A hot water bottle, if you can get one, is about as close to a miracle as it gets. You fill it with boiling water, wrap it in a towel, and clutch it to your abdomen with all the hope of someone holding a lottery ticket. It won't cure you, but it will distract you with the pleasant sensation of not freezing to death in your own bedroom. But water bottles are for the lucky. Many make do with heated bricks, warmed stones, or, in a pinch, a potato fresh from the coals. The result is much the same. Blessed heat, quickly followed by the vague smell of scorched laundry and an acute awareness that your comfort has an expiration time of about 20 minutes. When the brick cools off, you debate getting up to reheat it or simply accepting your fate and lying perfectly still, like a tragic heroine in a Bronte novel. Herbal remedies are another avenue, teas brewed from chamomile, peppermint, or motherwort, the latter tasting suspiciously like disappointment steeped in rainwater. Someone somewhere swears by each one, and, to be fair, sipping a warm mug of anything is at least a comforting ritual. Whether it actually eases the pain is debatable, but if nothing else, it gives you a socially acceptable excuse to be horizontal and cranky for the duration. For some, distraction is the best medicine. Reading is risky, too exciting, says the vicar, but knitting, embroidery, and staring blankly out the window are all fair game. The act of doing anything but think about your cramps is surprisingly effective, provided you don't move too much and can ignore the symphony of discomfort happening somewhere in your lower abdomen. Then there's the time-honored tradition of just toughing it out. Lying still in a dark room, shades drawn, family tiptoeing around your misery, and a faint hope that, with enough silence, your uterus might simply lose interest and wander away. In bigger households, you might get a visit from a sympathetic aunt with stories of her own suffering, which somehow makes things better and worse at the same time. You swap tales of woe, compare the relative merits of bricks versus stones, and maybe, if you're lucky, get a square of chocolate pilfered from the pantry. Of course, Victorian medicine has its own set of cures. Laudanum, opium in a bottle, will knock you out for hours, though it does little for actual pain beyond muting the universe. Some doctors prescribe female pills, loaded with iron, mysterious herbs, or occasionally a bit of arsenic for that extra kick. You take them only if you have to, mostly because the side effects sound more alarming than the cramps themselves. And let's not forget distraction by duty. For many, work is simply unavoidable. You have floors to scrub, children to herd, endless chores that will not wait for biology to finish its monthly assault. In this way, pain relief is less about comfort and more about endurance. You keep moving, gritting your teeth, and congratulating yourself for every minute you don't throw something at your brother. In the end, what works best is a combination of little things: heat, rest, gentle tea, maybe a sympathetic face, and a healthy sense of humour about the whole wretched affair. Pain relief in Victorian England is rarely perfect, often temporary, and almost always a do-it-yourself job. But somehow, you get through it. You survive another month, a little more stubborn, a little more creative, and with an even greater appreciation for modern medicine and the humble hot water bottle. If you're lucky, you get to try the latest invention, the menstrual belt. Picture a contraption designed by someone who's never worn pants. It's bulky, it chafes, and it only kind of works. Victorian inventors were nothing if not ambitious. They created everything from mechanical corsets to electrified hairbrushes, all in the name of progress, or more likely, profit. So it's no surprise that someone eventually tried to engineer menstruation out of the realm of mere rags and safety pins and into the dazzling future of adjustable belts, buckles, and a confusing number of straps. Enter the menstrual belt, a device that combines all the comfort of a chastity belt with the subtlety of a marching band harness. You might have seen the ad in the back of a ladies' magazine, an elegant drawing of a woman in profile, standing serenely as arrows point to her perfectly concealed, presumably odorless, menstrual apparatus. The copy promises discretion, freedom, scientific protection, and, most enticing of all, the ability to dance, run, and live unhindered. What the ad doesn't mention is that the average menstrual belt weighs about as much as a newborn puppy and is twice as likely to slip out of position at the worst possible moment. Here's how it works, in theory. A sturdy elastic or canvas belt fastens snugly around your waist or hips, from which hangs a loop or set of straps. To these you attach your absorbent pad, a rectangle of flannel, cotton, or whatever you have on hand, secured by metal clasps, pins, or sheer willpower. You then rearrange your drawers, petticoats, skirt, and corset in hopes that nothing shifts or creaks ominously. In practice, it's a constant struggle. The belt cuts into your waist if you tighten it too much, or sags pitifully if you don't. Walking sends it sliding sideways. Sitting turns it into a makeshift cheese grater. If you try to run, you learn two things very quickly. Victorian underwear is not made for speed, and your scientific protection is no match for gravity. Add to this the inevitable chafing, pinching, and the awkward waddle you develop after a few hours, and you begin to suspect that comfort was never part of the design brief. At home, you can at least adjust things in relative privacy, but out in public, every step is a gamble. You become hypersensitive to the faintest shift, imagining that every squeak of your stays is a sign of imminent disaster. Social gatherings are now fraught with additional peril. What if your belt is visible? What if you have to adjust it in the middle of tea? What if, heaven forbid, you have to use a public toilet? You quickly develop a new set of belt anxiety tics: the subtle hip wiggle, the cautious crouch, the desperate wish that women's fashion would catch up with women's needs. Of course, there are improvements every year. Some belts feature extra padding, others adjustable buckles, still others elaborate systems of hooks, buttons, or drawstrings. None of them solve the central problem. A menstrual belt is only as good as its weakest safety pin. And in Victorian England, that pin is inevitably going to give out at the exact moment you stand to curtsy to your mother-in-law. You might be tempted to go back to simple rags, but the marketing pressure is real. Every woman in your social circle claims to have found the perfect device, but you can see the truth in their wary eyes and the red marks on their waists. The belts may be new, but the struggle is eternal. In the end, the menstrual belt is just another chapter in the long story of period innovation. A noble idea, half-baked and overpromised, left dangling, sometimes literally, between hope and historical reality. You endure, you adapt, and you keep your sense of humour, because in Victorian England, that's really the only thing holding everything together. Early period products start to hit the market: powders, pills, and mysterious rubber devices. The ads promise comfort, elegance, and protection, but most deliver disappointment and a rash. Welcome to the brave new world of Victorian advertising, where every problem has a solution, and every solution is at least 50% wishful thinking. Nowhere is this more obvious than in the expanding market for feminine hygiene, a phrase never uttered out loud but whispered in every parlour. Print advertisements, slyly tucked between corset sales and hair tonic testimonials, promise you the moon, days of comfort, dignity, and the ability to attend church, tea, and a brisk game of croquet without fear. Reality, as usual, lags far behind the marketing copy. Let's start with powders. Madame Virtue's discreet ladies' powder claims to absorb odours, moisture, and your lingering sense of shame. The actual effect is to leave you with a fine layer of chalky residue and the delightful sensation of being dusted like a bookshelf. If you're especially unlucky, you'll discover that the powder cakes when mixed with sweat, creating a sort of paste best left undescribed. The perfume added for freshness is strong enough to make you sneeze, but never quite enough to mask the fact that nothing is really clean. Then there are the pills. Victorian chemists seem to have a pill for every occasion. Dr. Bland's female relief pills, Lady Clarissa's monthly elixir, and the ever-popular Mrs. Beeton's nerve tonic. Ingredients are a closely guarded secret. But let's just say they range from iron filings and herbs to actual arsenic and generous helpings of opium. The effect is predictably unpredictable. Sometimes you feel slightly better. Sometimes you lose an entire afternoon to a pleasant hallucination. And sometimes you discover that restoring the feminine balance is code for don't stray too far from the chamber pot. But nothing beats the sheer audacity of the early period devices. Rubber pads, discreet shields, and even patented sanitary receptacles, all carefully marketed with delicate line drawings and confident promises. The ads insist you can now ride horses, dance, and garden with abandon, thanks to this miracle of modern science. In practice, the rubber is stiff, the fit is questionable, and the experience is something between sitting on a hot water bottle and wrestling an inflatable life buoy into your underwear. The chafing is legendary. A good day ends with mild discomfort. A bad day ends with a trip to the doctor and a prescription for ointment. None of this stops the marketing machine. Testimonials abound, often written by men, with lines like, "My wife was never so lively," or "Mother reports no more complaints." The illustrations show cheerful, slender women, faces aglow with the satisfaction that comes from enduring monthly misery in the least plausible way possible. Discretion, dignity, delight. The advertisements promise, while you discreetly itch, undignified and anything but delighted. If you're tempted by the new sanitary apron, a contraption meant to protect your clothing, and presumably your reputation, be prepared to explain to your maid why you're wearing an oilcloth bib under your skirt. The only thing less subtle is the box it comes in, brightly labelled and impossible to hide if anyone opens your wardrobe. And then there's the social pressure. Everyone claims to have found the latest, greatest solution, and you're left nodding politely as your cousin extols the virtues of her impermeable safeguard, while both of you know you'll be back to rags and safety pins by next month. Victorian period products are the ultimate in buyer beware. They're expensive, poorly designed, and usually more trouble than they're worth. In the end, you learn to treat the latest product launch with the skepticism of a woman who's seen it all, and stained most of it too. Because if Victorian advertising teaches you anything, it's that hope really does spring eternal until it leaks, itches, or gives you a rash. Then it's back to the drawing board, and probably to the laundry as well. When the topic comes up, men either faint, bluster, or try to change the subject to trains. If you're looking for understanding or help, you'd be better off asking the family dog. To be a man in Victorian England is to operate in a world built on decorum, denial, and a heroic amount of selective hearing. There are only two acceptable reactions to women's troubles: dignified ignorance or theatrical distress. The very mention of menstruation sends even the most battle-hardened patriarch into fits of discomfort. Fathers retreat behind newspapers, brothers disappear into the garden, and husbands suddenly remember urgent business in town. Even the family's prized greyhound is less likely to bolt at the word period. If you're feeling mischievous, you might try a gentle hint, "I'm indisposed today," and watch your uncle's face twist with the terror of a man who's just been asked to explain basic biology. Any attempt at honest conversation is quickly derailed. Speaking of which, he'll say, eyes darting, "Did you see the new engine at Paddington Station?" Trains, it turns out, are the safe word for every awkward moment in Victorian society. On those rare, disastrous occasions when you truly need help, a request for extra rags, or, God forbid, a trip to the apothecary, it's a delicate operation. You approach your father or husband with the solemnity of a diplomat preparing for peace talks. The request is coded. Could you fetch me something from the chemist? For, the usual reason? He nods solemnly, sets off, and promptly forgets half the list. The resulting parcel contains cough syrup, licorice drops, and absolutely nothing you actually need. You thank him anyway. After all, it's the thought, however muddled, that counts. You learn quickly that the less men know, the happier they are. Etiquette books, written almost exclusively by men, dedicate pages to the rules of polite society, but the closest they come to periods is a passing reference to ladies' ailments. Anything more specific is handled with evasive language and flowery metaphors, preferably ones involving gardens, cycles, or the changing of the seasons. The goal is to say nothing while appearing very knowledgeable. In mixed company, the very hint of feminine inconvenience is met with panicked silence. At family dinners, if someone says the word cramp, every man in the room stares at his potatoes as though hoping for divine intervention. If you're unlucky enough to sneeze and clutch your abdomen, a cousin might ask if you're coming down with something catching. Better to fake a headache, the universally understood signal for please don't ask. Of course, this ignorance has consequences. Men are genuinely bewildered by sudden mood swings, tiredness, or the need for the third hot water bottle this week. They chalk it up to nerves, weather, or the pernicious influence of novels. Husbands may complain that their wives are out of sorts, never connecting the dots. Asking for a day of rest during your period is met with confusion or suspicion, but you seemed fine yesterday. So you soldier on, quietly grateful for the support of women who don't need diagrams to understand your pain. Among boys, it's even worse. Schoolyard whispers and half-baked explanations circulate, each more inaccurate than the last. If a brother stumbles upon your hidden rags or overhears a whispered warning, he might invent a wild theory involving vampires, poison, or witchcraft. The only thing less helpful than a Victorian man is a Victorian boy with a head full of rumours. And yet, despite it all, there's a peculiar comfort in knowing the men will never, ever ask follow-up questions. Your secrets are safe, not because they respect your privacy, but because they're terrified of your biology. In a way, it's a kind of freedom. You laugh with your sisters, swap knowing glances with your mother, and keep your code words ready for the next crisis. After all, in Victorian England, the less men know, the smoother your month will be. If you want sympathy, look to the family dog. If you want someone to change the subject, mention your female trouble. And if you ever need peace and quiet, try leaving a box of rags on the kitchen table. The men will clear the room faster than you can say menstruation. Finally, the week is over. You launder the last of the rags, air out the fainting couch, and try to pretend it never happened, until next month when the whole circus starts again. There's a strange, subtle joy to that first day post-period in Victorian England. You wake up and realise you're not immediately beset by dread or a mad dash to check your sheets. Your body, having spent a week plotting mutiny, finally decides to stand down. For a moment, you feel light, almost daring to believe you could skip across the cobblestones without worrying that your makeshift sanitary device will suddenly break free and make a public appearance. The laundry pile shrinks. The last bundle of rags, washed, wrung, and aired in secret, returns to its hiding place under your mattress or at the back of the drawer. There's a little more privacy, a little less strategizing. For the next 3 weeks, you can sit on any cushion in the house, wear your best skirt without a shawl tied around your waist for insurance, and even, with reckless abandon, join the family for a stroll without checking for secret stains every 5 minutes. Your body slowly reclaims a sense of normalcy. No more clutching hot bricks to your stomach. No more grimacing through parlour visits or praying your corset doesn't trigger another cramp. You can stand up without a moment's hesitation, sit down without a silent negotiation, and walk with something resembling dignity. You even dare to dream of a good night's sleep, not interrupted by discomfort, sneaky adjustments, or the all-consuming fear that your secret will leak out, literally and figuratively. Around you, the household relaxes. Your mother's lectures take on a slightly softer edge. Your sisters return to their usual bickering instead of their watchful conspiratorial glances. The menfolk, blissfully unaware of the battle just survived, resume their regular routines, reading the newspaper, waxing poetic about cabbages, and pretending not to notice the faint scent of lavender and lye wafting from the laundry room. It's a time for small pleasures. A cup of tea enjoyed without urgency. A favourite novel, perhaps even a little forbidden, devoured in a sunny window seat. You might sneak an extra biscuit or two from the pantry, rewarding yourself for your monthly ordeal. If you're lucky, you get a fresh handkerchief, a square of chocolate, or a quiet moment to simply breathe without the familiar, monthly burden pressing in on all sides. But even in this window of relief, there's the quiet knowledge that it's all temporary. The calendar inches forward. The days blur together in a comfortable routine: school, chores, church, and a merciful lack of drama. Yet somewhere in the back of your mind, you're always counting, always planning for the next round. Maybe next month will be easier. Maybe you'll finally find the perfect arrangement of rags and pins. Maybe, just maybe, some genius will invent something that doesn't chafe, leak, or require a master's degree in origami to use. Until then, you take comfort in the little victories. You survived another cycle, dignity mostly intact, reputation preserved, and, against all odds, a tiny bit of hope that someday things will get better. For now, you embrace the peace and the quiet, the rare sense of ease, and the camaraderie of all the women before you who endured the same, and all the women after you who will laugh at your stories and add a few of their own. The cycle ends, but so does the anxiety, at least for a little while. You savor it, you reset, you reclaim your days, your nights, and your well-earned secret pride. And when it all begins again, you'll be ready, or at least as ready as anyone ever is in Victorian England. Looking back, you wonder how anyone survived. Victorian women passed down their secrets, their stories, and their surprisingly effective stink eye for anyone who dared complain. The suffering was real, but so was the stubborn, often hilarious resilience. It's easy to marvel at their endurance from the comfort of a heated room, wrapped in soft pajamas, scrolling through your phone while microwaving a modern heat pack. But for Victorian women there was no instruction manual, just trial, error, and the ever-growing pile of family wisdom handed down through the generations. Grandmothers whispered their tricks for boiling out stains and keeping secrets. Mothers developed eyes in the backs of their heads for spotting disaster before it happened. Daughters learned to wield the emergency shawl like a weapon. And when one of them cracked a joke in the midst of agony, comparing a leaking rag to the Thames in flood, or calling her corset a portable torture chamber, that was survival too. Humour was as vital as vinegar and as quietly potent as laudanum. It let women laugh through embarrassment, bond over shared misery, and turn catastrophe into just another part of daily life. The rituals, the whispered warnings, the sly exchanges of advice behind the hedgerows or over wash basins, they all became a kind of inheritance. Tips for hiding stains, codes for discreetly requesting a fresh rag, clever stories about sudden headaches or the urgent need for solitude. Even the language was part of the legacy. Indisposed, under the weather, resting her nerves. All perfectly respectable ways to say, "I'm bleeding and I need 5 minutes of peace before I throw a hot brick at someone's head." Of course, the legacy wasn't just practical, it was psychological. Endurance became a point of pride. Surviving a day at work, a week of laundry, or a month under the suspicious gaze of family was a private victory, one rarely celebrated but deeply understood. Victorian women built invisible networks of solidarity, passing along not just their burdens but their sly strength, their sense of humour, and the quiet satisfaction of making it through another month with dignity, mostly intact. Some things naturally got lost in translation. Modern comforts, central heating, running water, Midol, elastic, privacy, would have seemed like wizardry to your average Victorian girl. Imagine her delight and slight horror at disposable pads or painkillers that actually work. But beneath the marvels of progress, you'd find a familiar face, a woman who knows how to improvise, how to adapt, and how to find a moment of laughter even when her day has gone sideways. The long shadow of Victorian period pain stretches into the present, a reminder that resilience isn't just about enduring hardship, it's about transforming it. The ability to complain with style, to laugh with friends, to invent a new method for pinning a rag or hiding a mishap, these are skills passed down, not just from necessity, but from a fierce desire to make life a little more bearable for the next in line. And if you sometimes feel overwhelmed, annoyed, or simply exhausted by your own monthly miseries, remember, you come from a long line of survivors, innovators, and accidental comedians. The women who came before you may have lacked modern conveniences, but they had an endless supply of determination and a quietly subversive sense of fun. They found a way through, one boiling pot, one awkward conversation, and one secret giggle at a time. So as you tuck yourself into bed tonight, clean and comfortable, maybe light a candle for those stubborn ancestors. Whisper a thank you for their ingenuity, their stubbornness, and their willingness to pass on the world's best stain removal recipe. Because the legacy of Victorian period pain isn't just about suffering, it's about survival, sisterhood, and the unbreakable tradition of laughing in the face of history's worst ideas. Step into the consultation room, where the doctor's knowledge of female anatomy ends somewhere around the female humours. Cramps? Back atches? Mood swings? Congratulations, you're suffering from hysteria, the one-size-fits-all diagnosis for anything that made women inconvenient. If you're lucky, the doctor recommends a tonic. If you're unlucky, it's time for leeches and a lecture about moral fortitude. Victorian medicine was a grand exercise in creative guesswork, especially when it came to anything vaguely gynecological. The typical doctor approached a woman's complaints the way a baffled handyman approaches a musical clock, with a lot of poking, some impressive, sounding vocabulary, and a strong hope that nobody asked too many follow-up questions. The prevailing wisdom was that women's bodies were mysterious, volatile, and best managed with a firm hand and a quick prescription. Start with the diagnosis: hysteria, a marvelously elastic term applied to nearly any ailment that didn't respond to cod liver oil. Got a headache? Hysteria. Can't sleep? Hysteria. Fainting spells, weepiness, or any suggestion that life is less than delightful. Hysteria, with a side of raised eyebrows. It was the Swiss Army knife of Victorian medicine, a handy way to say, I don't know, and frankly, I'd rather not find out. Doctors' appointments could be spectacles. After you nervously describe your cramps, the physician nods as if you've just confessed to plotting against the Queen. He consults a massive dusty medical tome, pages heavy with the accumulated wisdom of men who had never seen a uterus. He might recommend a tonic, ideally one containing alcohol, opium, or, for those especially lucky, both. Bottled female tonics promise to restore balance, calm the nerves, and sometimes make you sleep for 3 days straight. Side effects included drowsiness, constipation, and a general feeling of not caring whether your uterus was wandering or not. For those less fortunate, the answer was more invasive. Leeches were a favourite of the truly old-fashioned, applied to the abdomen to draw out the excess blood, as if the uterus was simply overzealous. There were also bleeding treatments, where a few ounces of your blood were removed to restore equilibrium, and blistering treatments, which were exactly as pleasant as they sound. If you protested, you'd be told your nerves were overwrought and your imagination far too active for your own good. The medical textbooks of the era were masterpieces of speculation. They contained elaborate diagrams of the uterus floating freely around the body, occasionally getting stuck in the lungs or causing hysteroepilepsy. The wandering womb was blamed for everything from migraines to moral failings. The solution, naturally, was moral improvement: less reading, fewer strong emotions, and a lot more needlework in a sunlit room. Nothing calms the female disposition like a bit of embroidery, the doctor might declare, with the confidence of a man who's never threaded a needle. If you persisted in complaining, the treatment escalated. Long walks in the country, strict diets of bland food, and absolutely no exciting literature. Your mother nodded approvingly. Your friends rolled their eyes. Sometimes you were sent to the seaside for a rest cure, which sounded lovely, until you realized it mostly involved bed rest and being told to stop thinking so much. Despite all the lectures, leeches, and tonics, Victorian women managed to survive and even laugh about it. Behind the doctor's back, women swapped real advice, whispered about remedies that actually worked, and rolled their eyes at the next round of medical nonsense. Sisterhood was often the best medicine, especially when the alternatives involved blistering ointments or another bottle of tonic labelled for nerves. In the end, you learned to treat the doctor's advice with the same skepticism you applied to laundry tips from the neighbour. You took the tonic, hid the leeches, and kept living your life, stubbornly, hilariously, in spite of your mystery anatomy. Because if Victorian history teaches us anything, it's that being diagnosed with womanhood is something you survive, endure, and sometimes even enjoy laughing about. Every Victorian girl knows the greatest horror isn't the blood. It's accidentally mentioning the blood. There are rules, and then there are rules. Euphemisms like my monthly visitor or indisposed swirl through parlours like whispers about a duke's gambling debts. Admitting you have your period is like confessing you've poisoned the punch bowl, met with horror, denial, and a sudden need to go check on the aspic. In Victorian England, language is a fortress. There are words for nearly everything: tea, toast, tuberculosis, but absolutely none for menstruation. It's not that it isn't happening. It's that everyone agrees to pretend it isn't. Periods are handled with the same careful secrecy as the location of your grandmother's false teeth or the real recipe for the family's Christmas pudding. A true lady knows that success isn't about surviving your cycle. It's about making sure nobody even suspects you're having it. From the earliest days, girls are schooled in the language of avoidance. Mothers, aunts, and older sisters explain the labyrinth of what must never be said. No mention of rags or stains, no speaking of pain or fatigue, and definitely no explicit descriptions of women's matters within 50 feet of a man, child, or particularly sensitive houseplant. The arsenal of euphemisms is extensive and ever-evolving. Feeling faint? Under the weather. Need a break? A touch of nerves. Suffering through day 3 and about to hurl a shoe at your brother? A little out of sorts, dear. When catastrophe strikes, a leak, a visible rag on the laundry line, an ill-timed wince at dinner, there's an immediate scramble for damage control. The women in the room exchange meaningful glances. Someone volunteers to fetch more tea. The men look up, vaguely confused, then decide it's safest to wander out to the garden and inspect the gooseberries. If anyone under the age of 10 asks questions, they are swiftly redirected to the mysteries of the butter churn. Society itself enforces the rules with the unspoken severity of a secret police force. Gossip is the currency of Victorian England, and any slip in discretion can spiral into weeks of whispered speculation. Did you see how pale Miss Carter looked, and how she refused the lemon tart? It's not the heat, you know. A stained handkerchief spotted at the church bazaar can spark more outrage than a broken engagement. You learn quickly to keep your language vague, your rags hidden, and your reactions perfectly neutral. Even among women, there is a curious mix of solidarity and subterfuge. True friends will know your code phrases. Shall we walk in the garden can mean, can you check my skirt? Or, do you have a spare rag? Depending on the look in your eye. In large gatherings, one raised eyebrow or the strategic passing of a shawl can communicate everything. Only behind closed doors, with sisters or trusted friends, can you allow yourself a whispered complaint or a commiserating sigh. Printed advice columns, written by matrons with names like Mrs. Prudence or Aunt Dorcas, are full of guidance for preserving your dignity. They recommend fainting couches, strategically placed smelling salts, and above all, silence. A true lady suffers in silence, they say, as though discretion is the only virtue that matters. And so, you do. You perfect your poker face, your polite decline of strenuous activity, and your ability to steer any conversation back to safe topics like weather, pets, or the Queen's latest hat. If, by some unfortunate accident, a direct mention does occur, a child blurts out something, a pin is found where it shouldn't be, the response is swift and unanimous. We do not speak of such things. The subject is buried, along with any evidence, in a flurry of linen and a firm reminder to mind your manners, dear. So, you survive your cycle not just with rags and shawls, but with an entire arsenal of euphemisms, a sixth sense for perilous conversations, and the knowledge that the real secret to Victorian propriety is never, ever telling the truth about your own body. Because some things are simply not discussed, and in Victorian England, nothing is more scandalous than honesty, except maybe a truly dreadful aspic. The city might be a labyrinth of social anxiety, but the countryside is a minefield of its own. Here you haul buckets, feed pigs, and run after chickens, while discreetly clutching at your skirts and hoping nothing shifts. No privacy, no ladies' lounge, just you, your trusty rag, and an audience of livestock who judge nothing, except maybe your technique. Life on a Victorian farm isn't the idyllic pastoral scene painted by painters or poets. It's hard, relentless, and sometimes downright humiliating, especially when your monthly visitor shows up uninvited. Imagine trying to milk a cow, chase a runaway goat, or carry a full bucket of water across a muddy yard while negotiating cramps, and a wardrobe that's determined to betray you at the worst possible moment. Privacy, as you might guess, is a myth. There are no bathrooms, no separate rooms with locks, and definitely no heating or hot water on demand. The outhouse is a wooden box, perched precariously at the far end of the property, shared by everyone from your grandfather to the hired hands, and hardly the sanctuary you'd hope for during those days. You time your visits with military precision, dashing out when the men are busy, the dogs are napping, and the pigs are too engrossed in their mud bath to notice your awkward approach. Laundry is an epic undertaking. The water is hauled from the well in heavy buckets, then boiled over an open fire. Scrubbing your period rags is a private ordeal done behind the barn or in a corner of the kitchen, hidden by hanging sheets or the inevitable line of drying clothes. The drying itself is a game of risk. Hang the rags too openly and the neighbours will gossip. Hide them too well and they never dry properly, adding insult to injury. Your clothes are layered and heavy. Wool skirts, thick stockings, multiple petticoats. All this to keep out the cold and, ideally, keep your condition hidden. But heavy clothes mean heat, and heat means sweat, which means discomfort multiplied. The thought of anything shifting or slipping out of place is a constant worry, especially when you're bent over tending to animals or hauling firewood. Speaking of animals, there's a certain mercy in their indifference. Chickens don't care about your cramps, sheep have no concept of embarrassment, and the family dog offers sympathetic eyes but zero advice. They watch as you fumble with safety pins, adjust your makeshift pads, and try to maintain some semblance of grace as you juggle buckets and bodily functions. Social occasions when they happen are no respite. Village fairs, church socials, or barn dances come with their own set of challenges. You can't simply take a break or retreat to a ladies' lounge. Instead, you develop a repertoire of subtle moves, the strategic sit, the carefully timed trip to the well, the ever-important shawl maneuver, all to avoid drawing attention to what's going on underneath your layers. Advice from older women is practical, if not entirely comforting. Don't get caught in the rain, your mother warns, and never sit on the new white bench. There's talk of herbal infusions to soothe cramps, but the real remedy is toughness. Endurance sharpened by years of rural living and the knowledge that you'll do what you have to do, whether your body cooperates or not. By the end of each day, you're exhausted in a way that's both physical and mental. The constant balancing act between survival, propriety, and your own biology is a delicate dance. But there's also pride in it. Pride in knowing you've faced down nature itself, the weather, the workload, the gossip, and come through with your dignity mostly intact. So, in the countryside, your period is less a private inconvenience and more a public challenge, met with grit, a bit of humour, and an unspoken understanding among the women who live it. No fancy conveniences, no quiet rooms, just the raw reality of rural life, where resilience is born not just of hardship, but of sheer necessity. And as you stumble back to the house, skirts caught on thorns and arms full of eggs, you know you'll do it all again next month, because that's the Victorian countryside, unyielding, unromantic, and utterly, brilliantly relentless. Going somewhere? Prepare to bounce along rutted roads or sway through smoke-filled train cars, all while perched on an unpredictable Victorian sanitary napkin. You'll become intimately familiar with every bump, jolt, and the mortifying possibility that your seat cushion may never be the same. Travel insurance for stains not included. Travel in Victorian England was an adventure in discomfort, even on the best of days. Add a period to the mix, and it becomes a slow-motion disaster film starring you, your bulky skirts, and a makeshift menstrual contraption that might as well have been crafted from leftover upholstery fabric and optimism. From the first lurch of the carriage to the final screech of the train brakes, your journey is a masterclass in anxiety management and bodily negotiation. Stage 1. The packing. Before you even leave the house, you're engaged in a secret military operation. Every rag, every pin, every shawl is checked, double-checked, and triple-checked. You pack extra, of course, because nothing says holiday like a suitcase full of vaguely ominous fabric bundles. Your travel bag is heavier than your bonnet and stuffed with a discreet emergency kit that includes vinegar, scented handkerchiefs, and enough safety pins to open a small haberdashery. Stage 2. The departure. Stepping into a horse-drawn carriage is a calculated risk. The narrow, hard bench is already uncomfortable without the added pressure of period wear. Every bump sends a jolt through your body. Your sanitary napkin shifting ominously. You clutch your skirts and hope that the coachman's heavy boots don't create a rumble so powerful it dislodges your carefully pinned defense. Windowless carriages offer no fresh air. The mix of sweat, horse, and leather is less than reassuring. Stage 3. The road. Rutted lanes and cobblestones become your enemy. Each pothole is a challenge to your composure and your linens. You learn to time your breathing with the coach's rhythmic bouncing and develop a sixth sense for when a bump is coming. Crossing a muddy puddle is a moment of pure terror. Imagining the stain you might leave on the upholstery, or worse, your own skirts. Stage 4. The station. Arriving at a railway station is a sensory overload of noise, steam, and the smell of coal. You clutch your belongings and your dignity as you navigate crowds of porters, vendors, and fellow passengers, all while discreetly checking your outfit for any signs of betrayal. Public restrooms are scarce, and you learn quickly which stations have the most tolerable facilities, if any. Stage 5. The train. The carriage is filled with smoke, chatter, and the unsettling sway of the wheels on tracks. Your seat is hard, narrow, and upholstered in what might be decades-old fabric. You balance your skirts, your bag, and your sanitary napkin with the grace of a trapeze artist. Any movement risks a shift, a slip, or, horror of horrors, the dreaded rustle that announces your secret to the entire carriage. Stage 6. The panic. This stage arrives in waves, moments when you imagine the worst, a sudden leak, a forgotten spare rag, or the inability to reach the washroom in time. Your heart races. You scan the carriage for exits, allies, or at least someone sympathetic. The desire to disappear into thin air is overwhelming, replaced only by the hope that your destination arrives soon. Stage 7. The arrival. You disembark, knees shaking, clutching your belongings and your hard-won composure. You breathe a silent thank you to the gods of hygiene and travel, and vow never to mix the two again, at least not without a carefully plotted escape plan, an emergency laundry kit, and maybe a sedative. Through it all, you learn to laugh quietly at your predicament. You exchange knowing glances with other women travelers, those fellow veterans who understand the peril of traveling while menstruating in Victorian England. The experience builds a secret camaraderie, forged in shared discomfort and mutual respect. So, if you ever find yourself bouncing along a rutted road or swaying through a smoky train car, remember, you are not alone. You are part of a long tradition of women who manage to keep their dignity intact, their secrets well guarded, and their seat cushions just barely salvageable. Travel insurance may not cover stains, but your resilience and humor certainly will. So, as you drift off tonight, tucked in with fresh sheets, temperature control, and a secret stash of chocolate in your bedside drawer, spare a thought for the unsung heroines of Victorian England, the women who faced every month with courage, a well-timed eye roll, and a sack of boiling laundry. They endured it all: leaky rags, social panic, medical experts who thought the uterus was just a wandering balloon, and the ever-present threat of ruining yet another set of linens. They survived an era when every inconvenience was wrapped in shame and silence, when pain relief came in the form of laudanum or the faint hope of a hot water bottle, and when female troubles were swept under the fainting couch and politely ignored. Yet, somehow, through all the corsets, crinolines, superstitions, and societal nonsense, they managed to keep going, to work, to laugh, and, occasionally, to quietly revolt against the madness. So tonight, as you settle in, maybe whisper a quiet thank you to the women who lived through all that monthly misery, whose stories rarely made it into the history books, but who paved the way for hot showers, Midel, and the glorious invention of elastic. Because history may be messy, embarrassing, and deeply unfair, but it's also proof that people, especially women, are stubborn, ingenious, and quietly hilarious, even in the face of the worst the past can throw at them. So breathe deep, let go of today's little annoyances, and be grateful for every soft pillow, every private bathroom, and every time you get to complain out loud without anyone prescribing you leeches. Good night, and may your dreams be as peaceful as a Victorian afternoon nap, minus the corset, the cramps, and the laundry.